किसी का किसी से, भावना मन में बदले की होना। हम चले एक रास्ते पे हमसे भूल कर भी कोई
भूल होना।
इतनी शक्ति हमें देना दाता,
मन का विश्वास कमजोर होना। हमने
सोचे हमें क्या मिला है, हम ये सोचे किया क्या है अर्पण। हम न सोचे हमें क्या मिला है, हम ये सोचे किया क्या है अर्पण।
फूल
खुशियों के बाटे सभी को, फूल खुशियों के बाटे सभी को। सबका जीवन ही बन जाए मधुवन हो। अपनी करुणा का जल तू बहा के, कर दे पावन हर एक मन का कोना। हम चले नेक रास्ते पे हमसे
भूल कर भी कोई भूल होना।
इतनी शक्ति हमें देना दाता,
मन का विश्वास कमजोर होना। इतनी शक्ति हमें देना दाता, मन का विश्वास कमजोर होना। मन का विश्वास कमजोर होना। मन का विश्वास कमजोर होना। ओम असतो मा सद्गमय
तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय। हो शांति शांति शांति।
ओम जय गंगे माता मैया, जय गंगे माता। जो नर तुमको ध्याता, जो नर मैया जी को ध्याता, मन वांछित फल।
ओम जय गंगे माता।
ज्योत तुम्हारी जल निर्मल आता, मैया जल निर्मल आता। शरण पड़े जो तेरे, शरण पड़े जो तेरे, सो नर तर जाता। ओम जय गंगे माता। एक ही बार जो तेरी शरणागति आता, मैया शरणागति आता।
यम के त्रास मिटा कर, यम के कष्ट मिटा कर,
परम गति पाता।
ओम जय गंगे माता।
मंगलकारिणी मैया तू है सुखदाता,
मैया तो है सुखदाता,
तेरी गोद में आकर,
तेरी शरण में आकर मन शांति पाता। ओम जय गंगे माता।
आरती मात तुम्हारी जो जन नित गाता,
मैया प्रेम सहित गाता, दास वही है सहज में, भक्त वही है सहज में, मुक्ति को पाता। ओम जय गंगे माता, ओम जय गंगे माता, मैया जय गंगे माता। जो नर तुमको ध्याता, जो नर मैया जी को ध्याता, मनवांछित फल पाता। ओम जय गंगे माता, जय गंगे माता, जय गंगे माता।
जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल हरि बोल।
जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल।
जय जय राधा रमण हरि
बोल हरि बोल।
जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल।
जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल हरि बोल। जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल।
ओ जय जय राधा रमण,
जय जय
राधा रमण, जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल। ओ जय जय राधा रमण,
जय जय
राधा रमण, जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल। जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल हरि बोल। जय जय राधा रमण, जय जय राधा रमण, जय जय राधा रमण हरि बोल।
A lot of ways to talk about passion. We get stuck sometimes in semantics, particularly English semantics, because words mean such different things. So if you talk about passion of the body, it's the body, right? We know exactly how it works. Now again, that doesn't make it bad. That doesn't make it an illusion. When we say it's not real, we don't mean it's an optical illusion. It's another way that we get confused. When we talk about something being not true, it's not like an optical illusion. It's not like, you're driving through on an asphalt road on a hot sunny day through the desert and it looks like there's water up ahead and there's not really water up ahead. It's not that type of falsehood. It's false in that it's a product of the body, which is not the truth of who we are. It's false in that it's fleeting, right? So if you look at physical passion, for example, on a very pure physical, literal level, it lasts usually a few minutes, right? Yeah. No. Okay, so we're going to get there. We'll get there. We're going to start on the most physical, then we'll get to things we have passion for. But it's important to clarify, because typically when we talk about passion, People think about it on a physical level. So if we're talking about passion physically, it's a biochemical response in the body, including the brain mind, of course. But in this physical being, there is a biochemical response that feels to me like passion. Okay? It comes, it goes. Is it real? Well, yeah, there was a biochemical response in your body. Had you been hooked up to machines at that time, they could say, yeah, this guy is right now very passionate. They could measure it. We know what chemicals are secreted. We know what hormones are going. We know what's happening in the brain. Okay. So it's real in that moment. It's real like a wave in the ocean is real. But it's not the highest truth. So it's not what we're looking for. Because when we spend our lives on fleeting moment, fleeting moment, fleeting moment, fleeting moment, fleeting moment, then we never find the truth, that thread, that sutra. What's constant? What's consistent? What doesn't change? What doesn't go up and down? What doesn't require physical sensation? What doesn't require being filled? What's not an urge? Because the other thing about physical passion, last before we shift into the other type, is physical passion is rooted in the experience of I need you. That's what it is. In that moment, I need you. Which means who I am in that moment is not full, is not whole, is not complete. My passion that gets aroused, that gives me this, like I'm looking at the world through a toilet paper tube. Literally, this is what passion/lust on a physical level does. Love is expansive. Love broadens our vision. Lust does this. Gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. I need you, I need you. This is what that is. In that moment, in that experience, me, as a self, is experiencing a lack of wholeness, fullness, completeness, because I need this in order to feel, right? That's the, okay, now I've got this from you. Then we go into a passion for doing things. Whatever it may be. You gave a few examples, but there's lots of things we could be passionate about doing. By all means, look, just because we are a soul, or we are soul, we are essence, we are consciousness, doesn't mean we don't have a body. Living as essence, as soul, as consciousness doesn't mean thou shalt not enjoy a sunset, thou shalt never make music or art. Or sit below the trees and, or love your children or love your family. That's not what it means. It's not about give up the things you love because they're not real. We've been given a body. And of course that body, as I said, includes the brain, mind. The universe is God's creation. Enjoy it. Sunsets are gorgeous. Making music, making art touches us on very deep levels. It's a way of expressing even a level of creativity that I believe comes from God. Absolutely. Writing, poetry, whatever it is. Create. Whatever you're passionate about, do it, sure. Because we've got 24 hours in a day. You can't sleep through them all. You can't meditate through them all. We've got hours in the day to do action. This is where Lord Krishna talks about karma yoga. Yoga, union, through action. So act. And why not act doing something that fills you with joy? Absolutely. But the dilemma comes when my joy is contingent upon that. So I can do the thing I'm passionate about, I'm happy. People appreciate the thing I'm passionate about, I'm even more happy. I can make a living doing what I'm passionate about, I'm super happy. Right? I'm a musician, I'm an artist, what I want to do is paint. People buy my things so that can become my living. Fantastic. But then they don't. And then I'm no longer fantastic. They don't appreciate it. I'm no longer fantastic. I don't have as much time to do that which I'm passionate about because I've got to do something else to put food on the table. I'm no longer fantastic. I'm not able to be present in the moment that I'm in because my mind is wishing I were doing something else. That's not the way to live. And so, yes, sure, have a passion. Fulfill it. Live it, love it. But when we talk about karma yoga also, remember that ultimately the highest aspect, that which makes the karma, the action, yoga, is when there's an element of union in it, when it leads to oneness. Is that bringing you closer to the divine? And for a lot of people, yeah, music does, art does, writing does, poetry does, whether enjoying someone else's or producing your own. But in order for your action to be yoga, it has to bring you closer into that union. And so ask yourself that. And if it doesn't, that doesn't mean you can't do it. I mean, people have passions for skiing, for example. They really love it. Or certain sports, they really love it. No problem, great, play, enjoy. Even though chances are they're not going to say that it actually brings them, in contact with God. Maybe a few would. But in general, that's not what you hear from most people who love sports. It doesn't mean you can't do it. We've been given a body. Enjoy. But stay focused. Don't miss the point. Don't miss why you're here. It's not just about this passion, this feels good, that feels good, I enjoy this, I enjoy that. What karma can I do? What action can I do through which I am getting closer to God? And it really can almost be anything, as long as the intention is right. And you could be sitting and doing puja, but making a shopping list in your mind, and it's not going to get you anywhere. And you could be playing tennis or writing music and so connected with the flow of the universe that that's more yoga than the guy sitting in puja but who's thinking about the stock market or thinking about the shopping or thinking about, oh my God, when is this going to end? This priest is taking way too long. I should have gone to the other temple. They've got, a much more expedited form of puja there that, drive-through type of puja. I should have gone there instead. It's about the intention and the attention. And that's what makes what we do yoga. How can I be free from depression and anxiety? Most of that which depresses us is unfulfilled expectations. We want things to be a certain way, and they're not. Whether it's the people in the world around us, we want them to behave in a certain way, we want them to speak in a certain way, we want them to treat us in a certain way, or whether it's the weather, whether it's traffic on the freeway, whether it's our employers or our employees. We have an attachment to how things should be. But they're not. Because of course, the world doesn't move according to what we want. The clouds don't check in with us first to make sure we don't have a day at the beach planned or a picnic planned. The traffic doesn't check in with us to make sure that we don't actually have some place to be. And so, if my happiness and my peace is anchored in how things should be, based on what I want, I'm always going to be miserable. Well, there may be moments in between in which things are what I want, but they're very, very short-lived. Very short-lived. And the dilemma becomes when it's people around us doing what we want. If I could ask maybe those of you who are sitting right by the door, if you wouldn't mind to just come in a little bit and up a little bit, feel free to move up, and it'll just make more room and easier for people as they come in the door to easily find a place to sit. So, it's very short-lived. The traffic for a moment does what I want, I'm happy. The weather for a moment does what I want, I'm happy. The stock market for a moment does what I want, I'm happy. With people, the dilemma becomes that even if I can get you to do what I want, if I have to make you do it, I'm actually never really satisfied anyway. This takes it a little bit deeper, but think for a moment. Let's say you are in a relationship. It's a romantic relationship, it's a family member, it's a friend, whoever it may be. That person is not acting the way you want them to. They're not treating you the way you want them to. They're not speaking the way you want them to. They're not doing what you want them to do. So you get angry. They then behave better, okay? In some cases, not all the time. In some cases. But the dilemma is, even in the cases where they do, even in the cases where we actually are able to change another person's behavior, it doesn't actually usually satisfy us. Because the best what we've gotten is behavior modification. When really, if we're deeply thinking about it, the problem we had is not the behavior itself, but the motivation behind it. So I'll give you an example. You don't come home from work on time anymore. You're always late. You tell me you're going to be home at 7 o'clock and you're never home on time. You used to bring me flowers when you came home. You no longer bring me flowers. Nobody helps me do the dishes. Nobody cleans up their room. I have to do everything. I this, I that. Now, in a family situation, I can get behavior modification. Most people don't like fighting. And so most people, if we're in a family together, are going to adjust rather than come home and face fighting every night. The dilemma is, that's actually not what I want. It's actually not so much about the time you walk in. It's actually not so much about the flowers, because I can start bringing flowers. I'll just tell my secretary to put in an order for flowers every day and hand them to me when I walk out the door. But the truth is, if what I've been complaining about is you're not bringing me flowers, you're not coming home on time, you're not helping me with dishes, you're not cleaning your room, really what that means is you take me for granted. Really what that means is you're not loving me, you're not respecting me. And so if what we get from throwing a fit, every time they come home we're angry, every time they don't help with the dishes we're angry, so we get them to do it. But now they're doing it not because they love me anymore or respect me anymore, but simply so that I don't throw a fit. Simply because they know if I don't do it, Cello, she's gonna have a fit, the whole night will be ruined. But what I'm really yearning for on a deep level in that case is your love, your respect. It's not about the flowers you had your secretary buy and hand to you as you walk out the door. And so when we push people to act a certain way, to be a certain way, for our happiness, in most cases, you can't make them do it anyway, so I'm miserable. In the cases you can make them do it, I'm still not happy because, well, you shouldn't do it just because I told you to do it. You should have thought about it yourself. Well, now it doesn't count because now I told you to do it. And then we're still stuck. And so the depression and the anxiety comes. Well, the depression comes because the world isn't doing what I want. The anxiety comes because I'm afraid that in the next moment the world isn't going to do what I want. The anxiety is if I let go of my death grip on this myth of control that I think I have on the world, it's going to all fall apart. It's not going to happen the way I want it to happen. Then I will be depressed. So they go together. I'm anxious in advance. I'm depressed during and after. And then, of course, I'm anxious about it for the next time. The only way out of them, both of them, is to realize I have no control over anything in this universe except myself. I am the only one who can make myself happy. I am the only one who can bring myself peace. It's going to rain if the pressure is right in the sky and the clouds are filled with a certain amount of water that they no longer can hold. It's going to rain. Regardless of whether it's my birthday, regardless of whether I have a picnic planned, regardless of whether I'm halfway walking home and I have another 2 miles to go, it's going to rain. It's a product of physics. There's an accident up ahead, road work up ahead, too many cars on the freeway, there's going to be traffic, regardless of where I've got to be. My answer, as long as it's focused on changing the world to adapt to me, is going to be an exercise in futility and create depression and anxiety. But if what we're looking to do is to live free of depression and anxiety, the only way to do it is to stop trying to change and control the world outside and to start looking inward. How can I change my reaction? How can I change my response? How can I change how I take this? And of course, how can I change my goal? Is my goal really about the time you come home? Is my goal really about the flowers? Is my goal really about the dishes? Or is my goal to be happy and in peace? And if my goal is to be happy and in peace, but I've hooked it into what time you come home, or I've hooked it into the stock market, or I've hooked it into what you say or do, then I've taken a very long route to happiness and peace, and it's a route that sometimes may get me there, most of the time won't. When the truth is, I actually have a shortcut, which is, regardless of what time you come home, I'm going to be happy and peaceful. I'm going to be happy and peaceful doing the dishes, because I've decided in advance I'm going to use that time to thank the universe for the fact that I've got water that comes out of a tap when the vast majority of the world doesn't. I'm going to use that time to marvel at the way that warm, sudsy water feels on my hands. I'm going to use that time to do my japa, my mantra. I'm going to use that time to think of as many things as I can think of in the 10 or 15 minutes it takes me to do dishes, as many things as I can think of to be grateful for. Right? Because maybe I don't have time for a gratitude practice the rest of the day, I'm too busy. Well, at least while I'm doing the dishes, I can have my gratitude practice. Maybe while I'm doing the dishes, I can do an extra round of jap on my mala, not with my hands, of course. My hands are in the warm, sudsy water, but in my mind. I've decided. It's not about the dishes. It's I've made a choice that I am going to be joyful and peaceful. And if I'm doing the dishes, then I'm going to be joyful and peaceful doing the dishes. And if your room is messy, well, okay. I can create enough space in my joy, that there can also be room for a messy room in it. Not that I don't have a preference, not that I wouldn't prefer you to clean up after yourself, but my peace and my joy isn't so limited, isn't so stuck in a little box that it cannot possibly coexist with a jacket on the floor, that it cannot possibly coexist with you being home 15 minutes late. That's a very shallow, very precarious, actually, joy and peace, because anything can tip me over the edge. I need it to be deeper. And in order for it to be deeper, it has to come from within. It no longer can be determined by the outside world. And so that's the only way to actually be free of depression and anxiety, is to look at what is it I expect from things and people over whom I have no control. What is it I expect? And to let go. Doesn't mean we don't hope. I have a great hope for justice in the world. I have a great hope that people will stop living on less than $1 a day. I have a great hope that 1 billion people will stop going to sleep hungry every night. I have a great hope that men will stop thinking of women as objects. Not all men, of course, and not all women, of course, but that violence against women, as though they were simply an object for power and pleasure, will end. I've got lots of hopes. And not just empty hopes, but rather hopes that I'm prepared to actually get up and work for, to try to make them happen. But every day when I wake up and find that 1 billion people went to sleep hungry last night, that there are still people living under $1 a day, that women were still raped yesterday, that I don't become so incapacitated by my depression that I no longer can get out of bed, that I no longer can find joy in a sunrise, that I no longer can find joy in all of the other aspects of this universe that are right. Because yeah, there are things that are wrong on a global level and on little individual levels. But there's also a lot that's right. And it doesn't do anybody any good for us to lose ourselves over that which is wrong. The goal is to stay so deeply connected within as the source of joy, of peace, that I can continue to see what's right, to celebrate what's right, while I also recognize what's wrong. It's not a Pollyanna view of the world. I can see what's wrong, and I'm going to work to right it in whatever way I can. But I recognize I don't have control over it. And this is just as true whether what makes you depressed is world hunger or your mother-in-law and everything in between. Because we don't have any more control over one than we do of the other. The best we can do is to just be our best, do our best. Work for it. Whether it's peace with your family members, your colleagues, or whether it's global peace. And again, everything in between. But we don't have control over it. And the minute I recognize that, my anxiety dissipates, because the anxiety is rooted in a myth of control. If I know I have no control over something, we tend not to get so nervous about it. The nervousness comes in this illusion of I should have control. But if we realize it's totally out of my hands. And of course, the last piece of this is we have faith. We realize that in whoever's hands it is a whether we think of the divine as just an energy, a force, or a being, however we conceive of the divine, it's one that's benevolent. It's one that's good. It's one of light. And I rest in my faith that whatever is happening, whatever happens, it's for a reason. And how can I take whatever happens as a lesson, as an opportunity for me to open and unfold and awaken? Because ironically, we tend to awaken much more in times of difficulty than we do in times of happiness. Ironically, crisis tends to push most of us into the place in which we are open, much more so than when everything is going well. Crisis tends to push us into an awareness of the divine universe and of our lack of control over it. And so we use every moment, we use whatever happens as a way. How can I awaken here? How can I peel back another layer here? How can I get closer to the truth of who I am here? How can I find the joy here, the peace here, the truth here? How can I expand my sense of self enough to make room for whatever's happened and to still be here? And that's what the path is. Not to try to change the world. During my meditation, my breath becomes more still, and suddenly it seems to stop. I have experienced this many times, but I can't avoid feeling scared. What should I do? When I first started meditating, I remember going to Puja Swamiji, my guru, and saying something very similar to that, actually. Because while there's so many different paths and techniques of meditation, of course, and I always hesitate a little bit to make any general statements because there's so many different techniques, and there really isn't anything that's more right or wrong or better or worse. Meditation is really a vehicle to get us across from the ordinary consciousness in which we live most of the time, where we identify just as the body and our whole life is just this material existence, and how much pleasure can I get, and how much pain can I avoid, and how many nice things can I grab and grasp and accumulate, and how much can I avoid losing my nice things. That's the way that most of us live. And so meditation takes us from that into the truth of who we really are, an experience of the self. And there's an infinite number of ways to get there. That being said, the question is about a very specific piece, so I'll share about it. But if this doesn't happen to you in your meditation, don't worry. If your meditation experience is something completely different, but it's taking you into the truth of who you are, and it's connecting you to God and to yourself and to the universe, then it's right. But in this case, I also practice a meditation that involves the breath. And when I first started practicing, what I would find is that in the beginning I was aware of my breath, I was watching my breath, I was working with my breath. But then, after a few minutes, it would seem like my breath was stopping, like the person who's asked this question. And I would always stop the meditation at that point, or, bring my awareness back to the breath. Because the time that it seemed to stop was just when I would hit a place in my meditation where everything was so still. There was a moment where I was watching my breath, chanting my mantra, and then the mantra would start chanting itself. I no longer had to do anything. And the breath seemed to just stop. And it would scare me too. And I would always then kind of shake myself out of it and come back to the awareness of the breath. And I finally went to Puja Swamiji and said, I'm really afraid I'm going to die. And he assured me, I tell this story because with the same assurance that he gave me, I'm going to give whoever asked the question, which is, you will not die. Your breath won't stop. People don't die in meditation. Unwittingly, unwillingly, just because their breath happened to stop. But there is sometimes a very real experience of feeling like the breath will stop. But don't worry, it's not actually going to stop. The body has got an incredible survival mechanism built into it that will ensure that you breathe. So if you reach a point of such stillness that it seems like the breath is stopping, don't worry. There's no need to do what I had done at the beginning of shake yourself out of it and come back. Stay with it. You won't die. Your ego may die. Your identity may die. How you know of yourself may die. And so a lot of times actually in meditation, the feeling of the breath stopping is one thing, but there's a lot of things that come up during meditation that try to pull us back out of it. Different fearful things, different experiences that lead us to want to come out. And this is really the ego being afraid of its own death. It's not the body that's going to die. It's that as we lose that sense of this is me, and we actually start to experience more, this is me, or I am that. There's a death of the ego that has built itself upon this is me. And in its last-ditch attempt to hold on to us, the ego tries to scare us out of meditation. So don't worry. It's actually a good sign. It means you're getting somewhere. It means you're getting somewhere enough that you're scaring your own ego. And so keep going. Stay with the meditation. The worst that will die, or the best that will die, is the ego. Don't worry about the body dying.